This is Jilliana Ranicar-Breese, and this is part 3 of my interview with Stuart Mattson. Stuart, now tell me about your life in Shanghai. Did you go there for a specific advertising job?
Actually, so towards the late 2000, in the early 2000s, advertising really started to change because of the internet and because of social media.
Yes.
So it started moving away from TV and print to digital work.
Oh, that's interesting.
And
yes.
in digital agencies,
And videos.
well, now YouTube, people are using all of those platforms
I know.
to communicate their messages, and I saw it happening because I was working with digital agencies that are affiliated with the main agencies that I was working with, and I remember telling the president of DDB where I worked that we should merge these because we should bring them on board. Often the digital agencies were in these crappy offices. They were treated as like poor cousins. And I said, the world is moving to digital. We should really do this. And they didn't. They said, well, no, because they looked down on digital.
Right. Not now, they don't.
TV was king. And I saw that transition happening as digital agencies started to get more and more work, make more and more money. But also their margins were really small. So they had to do a lot more work in order to really be as profitable as our agencies. And we had big, lavish...
But you could incorporate them in the offices.
We should have.
Bring their offices to your offices.
We should have done that. But what happened is, I think it was just... They were arrogant, and they were very pompous and snotty. And we had beautiful offices and had this, went on these... they spent a lot of money on TV and made a lot of money with TV. They were making 13 to 15% of the total budget, and digital was making much less. And also, it was sort of not as creative as doing TV and print. What happened, though, is the world moved to digital. But when you worked at a digital agency, I think if you were over 35, you were considered too old. And at that point, I was 50. And so I saw that, and I said, and also I didn't really like what was happening to New York. New York was becoming so touristy, one. I think the tourists ruined New York. Because when I moved to New York, nobody ever wanted to be in New York. It was the late 70s. And New York was a shithole then. And then what happened, gentrification and the influx of money, the growth of Wall Street, it cleaned up New York, and it became much less interesting, much less exciting. All of my creative friends...
And less dangerous.
And less dangerous. And that danger was exciting. And all my creative friends moved away. And so I was like, this place is becoming not as interesting as it was before. And I also looked at it and said, the agency, when I worked at DDB, I was there for 6 years. We had 550 people. By the time I left, there were 50 people. So the big agencies were falling apart. The digital agencies were growing. I was too old to really work at a digital agency.
Got you.
So my headhunter said, why don't you consider China? And so she set up an interview at McCann, and I flew to China, went really well, and so I said, I'll move here. And I've always been interested in Chinese culture.
Okay.
When I was in 7th grade, I went to a private, like a prep school, and was affiliated with a local university, and you had to pick a country, and you study it for a whole year, and then you would give a day-long presentation about that country.
And you chose China.
And I picked China. And so that started my sort of love affair with China and Asian culture.
So did you buy Chinese art as well?
So when I was there, I bought Chinese art, and one of the things modern art, and one of the things that I always did with art is I got to know the artists who I was buying from, and then I would commission work from them. And so when I was in New York, I commissioned a lot of pieces. Usually the brief to the artist was, I want something there was an artist I was working with who was doing small little pieces, but his work was really totemic. And so I said, just give me something this wide by 8 feet. And he made 5 pieces, and I bought 2. And so when I was in China, I was working with a few artists there, and basically commissioning work by just saying, why don't you do something round? And they would paint something. One artist that I collected, one thing that I noticed when I was in China, so this is like 2004, and the technique, they were technically amazing. They could draw anything. Actually, one of the artists I commissioned in my living room, I bought a painting that was probably 12 feet by 12 feet. And
did you have a big studio or a loft?
That was my living room in my apartment.
Oh.
And so I wanted him to, I translated into Chinese a part of the Ginsberg poem Howl, and then he basically painted that onto this big piece of canvas, and that was sort of like almost wallpaper on my wall in my living room. And then
and you're interested in poetry as well, aren't
I'm
you?
interested in poetry as well, and again, calligraphy. That I found he did a beautiful calligraphy, and so he did that calligraphic work for me. But then I also wanted him to do something round, and so he did a series of paintings of the moon, and they were beautiful in watercolor on canvas, and they were gorgeous.
And do you have photographs of all these things
Actually,
on your laptop?
That I don't have photographs of that. That painting is in my apartment because I've only been able to take things that I can fit into my luggage.
But you have a laptop here.
I haven't taken pictures of my artwork, no.
Oh, you should.
I should.
Yeah, if you had, we could have zoomed in today, had I known.
But actually, I have a lot of pieces. Then, actually, the artist that I did commission the work, that's this big by 8 feet, we had gone, there was a retrospective at the Museum of Modern Art of Jackson Pollock. And his work has the same energy as Pollock's work. And I went to the opening. I did an ad when I was at Ogilvy. And I was in the ad because it was for Seagram's. And the art director said, Stuart, I want to use you in the ad. And I said, okay. So I went on the shoot, and we did the shoot, and they said, oh, we have to pay you, but we can't give you money. We can give you a contribution to your favorite charity. And I said, my favorite charity is the Museum of Modern Art.
Oh,
and so they bought me...
That's a charity?
They bought me a premium membership. I think they paid me something like $5,000. And so I got the super duper membership at the Museum of Modern Art. And I kept it up because you got invited to like the openings of any of their shows, and they give you catalogs.
That's a good move.
And you got studio visits with the artists. So I got invited to the black tie opening of the Pollock show, and I was allowed to invite 2 people. So I invited this artist friend of mine and his gallerist, or his dealer. We used to call them dealers. And I said, Dave, Pollock's work was, huge. And I said, I want a piece now that's 18 feet by 16 feet.
How big was your apartment?
I had a huge loft. It was like 4,000 square feet. And I said, because he was broke, and I said, over the next few months, I'll pay you $2,000 a month to do this painting. So it took him 6 months, and we closed down the gallery, and we had a big party just for this one painting.
Yeah, right. Well, we'll continue on.
Okay.
Thank you.